Good morning, everyone. My name is Gretchen Rowe, and it's my very great pleasure to welcome you all this morning to this roundtable discussion about helping your distracted child. Capturing the attention of a distracted child is the holy grail of most homeschool parents. And I am that distracted child. I was diagnosed in my mid-50s with attention deficit. My husband was diagnosed at 17 with attention deficit. So I've lived the life. My eldest daughter 2 years ago was diagnosed and she said, "Mom, can you believe I have ADHD?" And I was like, "Really? Oh, okay." The truth of the matter is it's a lot more prevalent and it's almost ubiquitous. It's hard to get away when you have these things, and they make a tremendous amount of difference. Today, I have the opportunity to have two of my favorite colleagues join me because, man, we've lived this life. We understand it. We walk the walk and we talk the talk. So I am the homeschooling mother of six. Five of my children are graduated college. The caboose is a junior in high school. And I'm going to let my colleagues introduce themselves, and we'll go in alphabetical order today. So Amanda, how about you?
Hi, I'm Amanda Capps. I have been with Demme Learning for the last 12 years in customer service. I am a homeschool mom. I am a second generation homeschooler. So I was homeschooled all the way through, and I am currently homeschooling my own brood, of which there are 8. Yes, 8 of them. And I'm still mostly sane. So my
And that's her
oldest,
natural color hair too, I should say.
it is actually. So my oldest just graduated this past spring. So I've got my first graduate under my belt, and then I have several behind her to continue this great journey with. I've been married for 14, almost 15 years to my husband, Justin, and we do life as a crazy first responder family.
Kathleen?
Hi, I'm Kathleen Calabrese. I work in customer service for Demme Learning, and I homeschool 2 boys. My boys are actually 8 years apart, so I have a big gap between, but one has already graduated. He's 25. He homeschooled all the way through. And my youngest is a senior in high school. So I am just about at the end of homeschooling, which I'm probably not ready to be there yet. I wouldn't mind doing it a little longer. But it is what it is. So I'm just about.
I'll give you some of mine.
Yeah.
Give you some of mine.
Okay.
So let me say, those of you who are joining us today, you may certainly ask us questions in the chat. You may certainly ask us questions in the Q&A. This is not a formal, we have a presentation and then you have a response. We're here because you guys ask us to be here for this. So we have some thoughts, we have some things we want to share, but at any time, please feel free. I will monitor both the chat and the Q&A. Please ask your questions. We want to make sure that we are meeting your needs because you've taken an hour out of your precious day to spend it with us. So let's get started. We actually created a list of things that you could do and suggestions that we would have. And I think what we're going to do is we're going to go through the list and then we'll see what happens. And you ladies won't hold me to the list in numbered order. And so that will be awesome. So where I really want to begin is our first observation of slowing down. And Kathleen, you had brought this up, how important it was for you in the context of teaching your youngest to read. So could you share a little bit about that?
Sure. My oldest, I taught him to read when he was, 4.5, 5, and he took off with it and went with it. And then by the time I had my youngest child, started again, 4.5, 5, nope, couldn't read. 5 to 6, still couldn't read. By the time he was probably 6.5, I can't even say the number of curriculums I had tried to get him to read. I tried everything there was out there and he wasn't reading. So pretty much by the time he hit about 6.5, I was a little bit of an experienced homeschooler at this point, talked to a lot of other people, and I put the curriculum away. I just put everything away. He just wasn't ready yet. And that's what I realized, that he just wasn't ready yet. So we played a lot of games. I read a lot of books to him. And I just waited until he was ready, which was, I discovered one day in the car when we were driving and he was reading building signs, street signs. He was just reading, and I'm sitting driving in the car thinking, oh my goodness, when did this happen? This child can read. So at that point, I was able to pull the curriculum back out. But I realized trying to move forward with him, spelling, language arts, just all the different, he couldn't read. So it was just kind of all just going right over his head. So I just put it all away and I pulled it back out, and he is caught up. So I didn't have to worry about it being detrimental to him that I didn't start a reading program with him until he was 8, or I didn't, start a formal curriculum until he was 8. He just kind of zoomed ahead. So he's where he should be.
I think one of the things that we internalize as homeschool parents is everybody else's highlight reels. And so we see someone who has a 4-year-old who's reading Proust, and we're like, oh, geez, what's wrong with my children? And the truth is there is great statistical evidence for being willing to wait. As a matter of fact, I just read a peer-reviewed terrific study that said that waiting academically and beginning academics later is actually to a child's benefit. Every child is different. And I know in my 6 kids, I had one who did not read until he was more than 9 years old, and one who told me if I wasn't going to teach him to read, he'd teach himself to read at the age of 4. So every child is different. And I think the takeaway for you all as parents is to make sure that you're not reading someone else's highlight reels, that you're reading your child and you're reading them well. So let's talk, Amanda, about taking a lot of breaks and time between.
So I have found, because of having kiddos with attention issues, that sometimes that means we work in short focused sessions and then we need to take a break and then refocus. So allowing them that ability to understand that this is a short thing, that I need you to focus for 10 minutes, 15 minutes max. And then we're going to have a little bit of a break. That allows them to give me their best for that short period of time. And they also know, because I have found too, that sometimes my kids with attention issues are also my kids who have and bring a lot of anxiety to school and to academic endeavors. And so of course I want to, as a parent, minimize that. I don't want them to feel, anxious or stressed out about what we're doing. But I also can't say, hey, we're just not going to do anything so that you feel comfortable all the time, because that's also not productive or helpful or in helping them, harness and develop good coping skills, which they're going to need as they, continue on. And as they get older, those attention spans do expand a little bit. But let's be real. I mean, even as adults, if our meetings go much past an hour, we're checking out, we're tuning out mentally. That's a big chunk of time to maintain interest and focus in any subject. And so I've always kind of found that that's a real downfall of maybe a more traditional school or classroom model is, you've got these hour blocks of time. And so a lot of times we're having parents who are coming into the homeschooling arena, and I have to stress to them, we're not bringing school home. We're not going to take what a classroom does and bring it here and then set that up here. We can be much more intentional, much more effective with our time, and we can do shorter blocks of intense work and get more accomplished, and then take a break and come back to something else, or switch gears entirely, whatever it is we need to do. And again, this is a great opportunity to really watch for your kid. Watch what their cues are. You're going to notice when they're starting to lag, or when they're losing focus, or it's just becoming too hard to maintain focus, and then take a break.
Yeah, I think that does make a tremendous amount of difference. We have a colleague named Michael who has 2 little boys, and one of them is a typical, very focused firstborn. I'm going to get it done, and I'm going to meet your obligations. And then his second one is more attention deficit. I think I would say that he's the wild child, but I think he's just more interested in everything around him. And Michael has used a very practical tool, and this might be something that you parents can adapt. when Michael wants 10 minutes of focus from his son, he sets out 5 Duplos in front of him. So here's 1 Duplo, 2 Duplos, 3, 4, 5. And what he says is, buddy, I need your attention for 10 minutes. I'm going to take away a Duplo every 2 minutes. So what he's done is he's very effectively connected the dots for a child who at the age of 6.5 is not yet a time teller, but he's given him a visual to be able to recognize that. And that might be something that you could use for any child. I hesitate to say use a timer. You can find plenty of advice in the homeschool world that says using a timer helps a kid stay focused. But what we also know is there's research evidence that says using a timer creates anxiety. And as parents in that one-on-one tutorial experience, we want to keep anxiety out of the equation as much as humanly possible. So Kathleen, keeping a child's focus with fidgets. I know we talked a little bit about this. You want to talk to me? Tell me a little bit more?
Sure. So again, my youngest child, he's never been diagnosed, but this is a very high energy child. He has to have his hands moving, all the time. So we've tried just many different things. He had some magnet pieces that he used to just sit and play with, and he would use those while I was doing reading or doing schoolwork with him. Rubik's Cube was a good one. He actually wound up getting really good at Rubik's Cube and could solve it super fast, but it was just the matter of turning the pieces. He needed to have his hands moving. And it's funny because I remember like he was doing this when he was young, preschool. He was always into everything, touching everything. And then when it got to kindergarten, I thought, okay, it's time to be serious now. We have to put all this away. Now you have to do real school. You have to pay attention. But what I noticed was he needed to have his hands moving. And once I started, having the conversations with him and say, okay, what did I just say to you? He was able to tell me verbatim back. So I realized it wasn't a distraction to him. It helped him. He had to have his hands moving. And he did this for many, many, many years. He was probably still, 10, 11, 12 years old and sitting with his Rubik's Cube as we were doing, because that's what he needed. He needed that to help him focus. And it's funny because when I was thinking about that, it also reminded me that my oldest child, who was very well focused, he always had stuffed animals in his chair. And I realized that it's a comfort thing too. Some of that, needing to have something, it's a comfort thing. He always had his little stuffed animals next to him when he was doing school for years, because that just it actually helped him to focus better, knowing that he had them there. So that was something that worked too.
Sure, absolutely. One of my kids had a piece of a blanket. It was like this big. And I would see when he was concentrating, all of a sudden that piece of blanket would come out of his pocket and he would hold that piece of blanket. And, I think it does make a difference. I think as well for parents, it comes down to how observant are you of your children. And I have to confess, I wasn't as observant as I needed to be, because in retrospect, I can tell you that, yes, all 6 of my kids had attention deficit, but it looked very different in every child. And so, Amanda, I'd like you to talk a little bit about the audio learning, how earplugs can help, how headphones can help, and that kind of thing as well.
Yes, ma'am. So that is one area that if you have highly auditory kiddos, which my 12-year-old daughter is, and she's wired very much like her daddy. So I notice my husband gets easily overstimulated by too much auditory input or sound. And so does she. And so but that can also be an incredible strength because basically if I can get anything in her ears telling her, she can listen to a book at a much higher grade level than she can sit down and try to focus and read that book and take in that material and comprehend it. Whereas if I put headphones on her and set her up on Audible and it's just playing an incredible audiobook, I don't even have to read the book. I can say, hey, Ev, give me a synopsis, and she can just say, hey, this is it, and this was my favorite part, and this is why, and this is my favorite character. And she can just kind of run with it. So there are so many more opportunities now because people are catching on to this, especially in the dyslexia realm, that more and more curriculum are having MP3s or audio companions where that big textbook might be read by the writer of the curriculum. Or she loves Jenny Fulbright and she told me the other day, Mom, I wish she was the narrator for such and such. And I was like, oh, interesting. And that's another thing. They are very picky about who. I have seen my husband absolutely not be able to listen to a book based on the narrator. If the narrator is not good, so he always listens to a sample first to make sure he can actually even handle the accent, the inflections, the tone of voice, those types of things. And oddly enough, a lot of times these kids listen to the books on higher speeds than I can. I mean, I'm an auditory person, but I can't even process it as fast. And so they can get through books in lightning speed by speeding it up, and the comprehension is there. So it's amazing. So there are special earplugs that can tone out some of the noise, that like dim it. There you can do full on headphones, you can do noise canceling headphones. I mean, there are so many great options. I know at times in a homeschool environment, it can be very difficult because you've got multiple ages, multiple developmental stages, and everybody's, running in and out, and there are toddlers. And so, I mean, it can feel a little chaotic for those kids. And so looking for some of those tools to kind of help them function in those environments to the best of their ability can really, really help.
I have a set of headphones here that are probably 10 or 12 years old. In fact, all of the fake rubber is worn off of them. And these were noise canceling headphones that my now 22-year-old dyslexic son would use when he was trying to focus and be concentrated. He found by the time he got to high school that input was very distracting for him. So what he would do is he would put these on and plug them in, and they gave him the opportunity to listen to white noise. And white noise and there are actually different qualities of noise. So this is something that you have to look into and you have to pay attention to as a parent, because not all noise sounds are created equal. And what we found for him was that there was music, a kind of music, it's called lo-fi. And lo-fi actually increased his ability to attend. White noise was okay, pink noise was better, gray noise made him angry. It took trial and error to figure that out. So I think as a parent, you can become a great researcher. And I think maybe this is time when I want both of you to talk a little bit about the difference between learning styles and learning preferences, because we've learned a lot. And I came up in the homeschool generation where you tailored your curriculum to your child's learning style. And now we've learned that really it's more a preference. How would you prefer to learn, as opposed to the only way you can learn? So could each of you take a minute or two and talk about how that has manifested itself in your households? Kathleen, will you want to start?
Sure, I'll go first. Okay, let's see. Well, for my oldest child was such a compliant child, where basically anything I would hand him to do, he would do. He would just tackle everything. He very rarely said, I don't like this book, or I don't like learning this way. So he just kind of tackled everything. My youngest child, from the time he was little, asked me why. But I would say to him, okay, we're going to do why. Why do I need to learn about that? Why do I need to learn that person? Why do I need to write those spelling words? I already know how to spell those words. Why do I have to? Everything was why. So I had really had to constantly tailor, okay, how does he need to learn? And it's funny, one of the things was, this is a very high energy child, and he loved bright colors. His clothes were always fluorescent, and he loved music, and he loved jumping around, and he was, super high energy. So when it was time to do school, though, what I realized was all that had to be cut out. I remember one of the first workbooks I purchased I forget, it might have been like a grammar thing, and it was real colorful and it had cartoon animals and stuff all over it. That didn't work for him. I thought it would, because I thought this is a child who is into colors and everything, so he needs a workbook with colors. No, it was the opposite. It absolutely was the opposite. And even the Matthew C book, when I had that and I pulled that out, he couldn't even have the whole book in front of him. I had to pull the pages out, and he had to have one page at a time. So that was such an interesting thing, where I thought his personality made me think he was going to need to do school a certain way, and that wasn't the case. What he needed was to be able to focus on one little thing at a time, and not have it be colorful, and not have it be loud, and not have a lot of fluff. He didn't want the fluff. He didn't need the fluff. He was very much, okay, tell me what I need to learn about that subject and let's move on. You don't need to go on and on about it. And he would say that to me. So I learned quickly how he learns, and I just had to fit it to what helped him to learn, and then be able to, retain that information going forward.
Amanda, you have lots of different learning styles in your family. So how does
I
that
do.
manifest? How do you adapt? Give a mom some encouragement on how you adapt based on the child next to you.
So, I mean, I think again, it's just that, that observance, and really kind of, looking at your child as a whole package. Like, there are always going to be strengths and weaknesses present. I mean, that's just the way everyone's wired. I mean, I have certain strengths and weaknesses. There is no, perfect student, perfect child, perfect parent. I mean, so you can just go ahead and kind of get that out of your system, and then dig in and be a realist and go, okay, so what do we do with what we've got, and how do we maximize and encourage and set this kid up for success, because we can absolutely set our kids up for failure. That is a thing. It's totally a thing. We can set ourselves up for failure. Comparison is the thief of joy. And so if your joy's gone and you're constantly comparing yourselves amongst yourselves, it's probably not going to be a very fun or happy experience at all. And so keeping that kind of singular mindset of, this is what you're really good at, and encouraging in those areas, and then going, okay, this area is harder. It's harder. It's not impossible. Let's see what we can do. Let's see what strategies, what tools, and then look for those things. It might be manipulatives for one child who needs to have something tactile and hands-on, and they're maybe not making pictures in their head, and they need that visual element to make it all connect and make it all make sense. For other kids, the stuff might be too distracting, and they're going to be so involved in their little imaginary world of building with the blocks and making castles and the princess. And I mean, they'll just go on a trail, and you're like, wait a minute, we just needed to focus and do math for 15 minutes, guys. Come on, stay with me. All of those kids exist in my family. And so I have to be very intentional about how I set each kiddo up, the environment, what tools they have. Some kids, I can have all the books out on the table. I can have the toddlers playing. Other kids, we have to go away from everybody. We have to shut a door. They have to work in a quiet environment, but they might need music or they might not. So, again, really pay attention to the cues. If you're watching, if you're observing, if you're engaged with your kids, those things will become very apparent and very present. And you might notice some things where it's like, wait a minute. Okay, wow, this is outside of my realm of knowing what to do. We might need to pull in an expert. We might need to get somebody who this is their specialty, and they may have ideas or tools or testing or things that we need to do or therapies we need to put in place, because this just is a little bit beyond what a typical parent. And I mean, that happens for parents across the board, not just homeschooling parents. There are families that have kids with special learning styles, special needs, and you don't have to be afraid. There's all kinds of resources and all kinds of supports and all kinds of things out there, but you can start educating yourself. You can start taking notes, keeping notes. All of those things are really critical to helping your kids set up for success. And I will say, I do remember distinctly, because I'm the oldest of 5. My sister had some pretty intense visual and auditory processing issues. And I remember one day, literally my jaw hit the floor because she just looked at my mom and said, "Shut up. You use too many words." And my mom was like, her eye, and we all looked at each other because like she told my mom to shut up. Like, what is happening? I mean, lightning is going to strike. But she was frustrated, and it was the only way that she could communicate. Like, you're just putting too many words out there. And so sometimes you got a kid that just doesn't need very many words.
Which is a great segue to allowing your children to collaborate with you in the educational process. So both of you had really salient observations about that. Kathleen, can you talk a little bit about that?
Yep. Again, so my kids were 8 years apart. So for my oldest son, by the time he was getting to probably middle school, he was really kind of, I'm going to take my books and go in my room and do it on my own, because I was with my youngest guy and, trying to help him. So he did want to have some input at the beginning of the year as what curriculum, what he was using and what topics he was covering. But so I would allow him, to do that. We would figure it out together. My youngest child, from the time he was 5 years old, all the way up until now, it's why for every single topic, every single thing. And a lot of it has been the answer of, because this is what you need to learn to be successful in the world. Pretty basic, pretty standard. Why do I have to do math every year? Why do I have to? Okay, well, you're going to be, an adult who can go out into the world and work and, be able to have intelligent conversation. But every other thing has always been having that conversation with him. But the good thing that I have seen from that is, because he had a say in it and because he understood why we were doing it, he was invested in it. And then once he got into it and he was doing it, then I wouldn't have the struggle with him. He knows that, he's doing a unit study on transportation because that's what he asked to do. That's what he wanted to do. So he's invested in it. So I don't worry as much about, that it took away some of my choices. I want my kids to be invested in what they're doing. So I realized that it was a good thing that they were, giving me feedback of what they wanted to learn and what styles, definitely with my youngest, again, he doesn't like the fluff. So he wants things that is right to the point. He recently did an anatomy and physiology course, and I had to go through a few different ones because he didn't want the fluff. He wanted to know exactly what is going to teach me the parts that I want to know. And he specifically wanted to know, he's very much into baseball. So he really wanted to know about muscles and, that once I had that conversation and I knew exactly what he wanted to learn, then I was able to pick something that fit with that.
So Amanda, I'm going to take this tack in a little bit of a different direction, because I know that we have had conversations about the difference between necessary and nice as far as what you include. And I know that you have weighed this very carefully as far as your different learners. So can you talk about what you feel in your homeschool experiences are the necessary materials, and then how you add the extra things?
So yes, because I have multiple students in multiple age ranges, while I would love to be as flexible as Kathleen with her 2 students, that would be insanely chaotic if I just opened it up and was like, okay, everybody tell me what you want to do and what you feel like doing today. I mean, it would be a nightmare. So it's not that we can't still give each child some choice and some responsibility in their subjects, because we absolutely can in both environments. But with my kiddos, I already know that if the curriculum is cumbersome, if it requires a lot of teacher prep on my part, it's going to sit on my shelf and collect dust. So I'm looking for very specific things, and the core subjects are just non-negotiable. I mean, we're going to do math, we are going to read, we are working, on English and learning the parts of language and writing and learning how to express ourselves well verbally and to express ourselves well in written form. And we are reading good literature. Now, outside of that, I would also say you have to know when to cut your losses, because there are certainly curriculums that I have gotten into and been excited about, and you get a semester in, or maybe even just a couple of weeks or 3 weeks, and you go, this is a disaster. This is not working. It's not working for this student. And so it's got to be, you've got to be comfortable with enough with yourself and with your student that it's like, you're not going to sit there and beat a dead horse. You're not going to say, okay, but I spent money on this, and so we're going to finish it, and this is what we're doing. Sometimes it's completely fine to go, okay, lesson learned, shelve it, sell it, and move on. That is really, really, really important. And that actually happened with my oldest child, who is an incredibly smart, self-directed. I mean, she was basically doing school on her own. And she came to me and was like, this science is killing me. Like, it is so much. It is so much. It is so much. And I just can't digest it all. And I went, okay, we shelved that. And we moved on to something that was, like Kathleen said, it just didn't have all that extra fluff. I mean, it was very just like, this is the basics of what you need to know, and kind of more of an overview type feel. And suddenly she was making straight A's again, and she was happy, and we moved on and cut our losses.
I love that. The fact that both of you were willing to take feedback from your children. And I remember very well, one of my kids in 6th grade hated the curriculum we were using so much that he said he wanted to go back to the curriculum we had used the preceding year. And being the good German mother that I am, I said, well, I spent the money for this. Yeah. I'm an only child. I was born a tiny adult. I could not see it from his perspective. You know what that kid said? He said, I'll pay for the curriculum to go back to what we did last year in the next level. And he did. He threw newspapers, he cleaned people's yards, and that child was motivated by doing that. So I'm not saying that that was the best approach, but I will say he's 31. He started his own business before he started college, and he paid his own way through college. So I think we got the economic lessons out of it that I wanted. Maybe there were heart lessons in there that I could have learned in the process, but I think it's very important as parents. Your takeaway is your children are doing the materials. If they're providing you feedback that it's not working, listen to them, because there may be legitimate reasons why they feel like this is not the approach that is best for them. So can we talk, ladies, about planning ahead so that your child is not waiting on you? I know both of you have feelings about this. And I know that I was a planner. I always knew exactly what was going to come in a day before it hit the child. I knew what to anticipate from them. But it also meant that I needed to front load a lot of effort as far as being prepared for my children. And when you had a bunch of them, it was a lot of preparation. So can you all talk a little bit about that preparedness in advance so they don't have to wait? Kathleen?
Sure. I was a before the year planner, and then, planning out my curriculum for the year. And I was one who enjoyed in August, cutting all the pieces out and getting everything in baggies and getting it all ready. I liked that part of planning. I liked that part of homeschooling, but I was also a Sunday night planner. Every Sunday night, I would make sure that I had what I needed for the week. And again, my youngest child taught me that I had to do that. He had, the attention span was short. So I had a limited amount of time to do things with him. If I had to be going to find this and going to find that, and now I need a glue stick, and now he was gone. And I wasn't getting him back for another hour until I could refocus him again. So I learned quickly, I had to have it here, I had to have it ready, and I had to have everything that I needed, every little piece was ready, so that when I called him over and said, oh, okay, we're gonna do this, and I was ready to go. If not, we weren't getting that activity done, or you
So
know.
before we walk away from this, is that where you employed work boxes? Tell me a
Yes.
little bit about your work boxes.
Yes, also I use the work boxes, which is I put each subject, each thing that he's going to learn into the plastic storage system. And again, with both my kids, because it works out, because I have two, I'm not sure if this would work for Amanda, but I let them pick every day. What do you want to do first? What do you want to do next? I let them pick. So that gave them ownership on it too. And they would just go over and they would get the workbox. But again, that's where I had all the material in there. I had everything, even to the glue sticks, scissors, everything was in there so that he could pull it out and say, I want to do this now. And then he knew that he needed to sit and focus for a few minutes while we're working on that particular thing in that workbox. And for, I guess for both of them, but really for my youngest child, it also helped. We had little Velcro labels on it. So when he was finished with that, he pulled the label off and put it on the done poster. That helped him to see how much he had to do for the day. And that was a big deal for my youngest, because right away from the start, he'd say, how long is school today? How much do I, in that whining voice. And that's about the time that I started the work boxes. So he could see all the time, oh, I only have one more to do, or I only have two more to do. And it was able to help him to focus better when he knew what he had to do.
That's a terrific evaluation. I will tell you all that one of the things that I have read in the last year about attention deficit, when I was raising my children and I knew that we had some issues there, I had been told by experts in the field that you always ate your frog first. In other words, you did the thing that was the most difficult first thing. But there is evidentiary research that's been published in the last 2 years. You can go find it on keeping a child engaged who has attention deficit, that if you ask them to engage in something that interests them first, they're more likely to stay engaged as your day progresses, instead of you deciding for them what they will do. If they have the autonomy to make the decision. And what the research says is they find that if a child can choose something that they appreciate doing and they find virtue in doing, it allows them to step into that educational frame and stay there longer. And these researchers had actually done a controlled study where they had children who were prescribed how they would do their academics, and then children who got to choose. And they found that the choosers, if you will, had greater engagement with their educational process. So Amanda, I know that you do some of this with your kids. I love Kathleen's work boxes. The Velcro thing is like, geez, maybe I need to do that here in my own office for me. But how does that work for you a little bit as far as maintaining order?
So yes, I would love to say that I am the most on top of it organized person and that I do a lot of planning, but our school looks probably really different than most folks because I work part-time, because of my husband doing shift work where he's gone for 24 hours and then home for 48 hours. That means there's a lot of back and forth and who's doing what. And so it's a lot like who's on first around here. So typically the way I focus is I know I have the least amount of time left with my oldest, whoever that child ends up being. So now, I've got one graduated, but the next one in line is 15. So she's got the least amount of time left. So I always feel like I focus in on her and what she needs and what needs to be done. And then it's a trickle down effect. So everybody else kind of falls in a pecking order. And so that's kind of how I structure my day, because I feel like the big rocks are important. And then the pebbles in the sand kind of fit around her as we go. And so that's kind of how I've always structured my learning experience for my kids. The other thing that we do is, like I talked about, all my curriculums are open and go. So I can literally be like, okay, I've got 20 minutes right now. Let's do history. And I'm pulling my books off the shelf. Now, that has been revolutionary. This house is a relatively new house to us, and we doubled our square footage. And so I actually have a classroom, a room that is designated to school and to school materials. And that has been fantastic. So while I don't have boxes, I do have a shelf that is basically square cubbies, and each child has one, and each child has all their subjects in it, and they are responsible for doing what they're, working with what they're supposed to for that subject, and then making sure it gets back to the shelf so that it's there when we need to go again. If they lose something, if it's not there, then there are consequences, because that infringes on the time we have available to do it if we're having to stop and look for stuff. So that's kind of where I would say most of my focus has been. We also school year round. Life in a big family, there's always something that is interrupting things. So I find we stay on track better also with my different learners. If we take too long of a break, we lose too much. We lose too much ground. We have to review. And I just don't want to take the time to backtrack. Like, I don't want to have to do that. And so we try to keep a more consistent, always moving forward. And we might take shorter, more sporadic breaks more frequently throughout the year versus a big long break in the summer. And so that works really well for us. And depending on where you live, it may be too hot or too cold, to really do anything fun during those seasons anyway. So why not maximize the time where you're sitting in the air conditioning or sitting in the heat, and making sure that you're making the most of it.
We in our family did school beginning in August. We'd start with math, and reading was a year-round enterprise. Math was a year-round enterprise, but we became more intentional in August. September, October, November were 5-day-a-week school days for us. We took off from Thanksgiving to the 1st of January. There was no school done in my household. And I can't even tell you that we even got reading done on a daily basis. I would like to tell you that we tried, but not every day was that. When the weather was lousy in January, February, March, we did school 6 days a week, because if you can't go outside, you might as well make hay, right? So in April, we went to a 4-day-a-week school schedule, and then we would take a summer break, but I never let them off the hook for reading and mathematics. And the reason is because, exactly as Amanda says, you've got ground that you have to gain and you have to maintain. Can you all speak briefly about the night owls versus the early bird and those who get the worm? So Amanda, can you talk a little bit about that? I know you have both kinds in your household.
Absolutely. So my little ones, my toddlers, they're up the minute the sun hits the windowsill. They're like, and they're early and engaged. And so thankfully for them, I am a morning person. So I'm typically the one that kind of gets up and gets moving and gets the day started. And so that has worked really well. Now I have a son who is 10, who is very much like that. And so he gets up and he's engaged, and he wants to get right down to whatever he wants to get, because he wants to get out of the way and get done and move on to other things that he wants to do. Now, my 15-year-old and my 12-year-old, if I tried to have that tact with them, it would be absolutely pointless. They do not even remotely engage until about 10 a.m. They aren't putting thoughts together. They're not functioning at full steam. They're barely out of a comatose state at that point in the morning. Now, I am done, and nice mommy is checking out at 8 p.m. because I've been up since between 5:30 and 6:30, and I've had a long day with a bunch of kids. And so I don't do bedtime routine. My husband is a night owl. He does bedtime routine because he's got his second wind and his energy. Then he doesn't get going in the mornings. I never have a conversation with him that I want there to actually be any sort of decision or retention of if it's before 10 a.m. It's just not going to happen. I've learned that in the years that we have been married, that he will just look at me and go, I don't know what you're talking about. And I'll be like, but we had this conversation. And he'll be like, I don't remember it. I'm like, okay. So after 10 a.m., we can have conversations we remember. Same with these kids, and teens, they tend to be night owls, and some of them like to work at night. I mean, some of them would rather, their most productive time is between, 8 p.m. and 10:30. And I'm just like, more power to you. As long as you can show me that we're getting it done, I can be flexible with when it's being done. But if I tried to force a child who is not running on all cylinders, they're going to be miserable, and it's going to be fruitless, and I'm going to be shooting myself in the foot, and they're going to hate their experience, and it's just not worth it. So kind of paying attention to where they're at in their cycles. Teens absolutely need more sleep, it seems like, and they like to sleep in versus, getting up early. And so, having the allowances for both just creates better harmony in the family.
Kathleen, do you have anything to add to that?
Pretty similar. Again, because I only have 2 children, I allowed, a lot of flexibility, allowing them to, okay, are you ready to start school now, instead of a set time. But both of mine they both had periods where they would want to play and do other stuff first and then start school, or they both had long stretches where they wanted to do school first thing in the morning when they got up, because that little bit, I want to do it and get it done so then I can move on with my day. There's been times I got up in the morning, and by the time I walked out of my room, they're telling me, look, I already did this and this and this. And I'm like, okay, great, good job. Because they knew that I gave them that flexibility to just, as long as the school is getting done, well, let's be, just figure out when to get it done. And when they took that on themselves, it worked out. Yeah.
So I want to talk, as we come to the last 15 minutes here, about some practical tools. One of the things I think that is important is, Amanda, you talked about time blindness. And this might be something that a non-ABD parent doesn't understand that is happening to their students. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Oh man, was that a learning curve for me, because I tend to be very time aware, and I know about how long a task is going to take me. And I mean, I have to be aware of time all the time. I mean, that's just, and I've been that way since I was
what does it look
very
like
young.
with your kids who don't have that same
Exactly. So then when you have children who, I mean, they can take a 10-minute task and make it 3 hours, or they can take a task that, is 3 hours and they're trying to condense it into 10 minutes. And you're going, why are you so frustrated? That is exactly, what ends up happening. And so I have had to be very intentional about, and that's where timers actually really are a great thing, because while you can use them to count down to things, you can also use them to document things that are happening within a day. Like, it shouldn't take you 30 minutes to brush your teeth. It should take 5. And this is what 5 minutes looks like. And, and you set the timer. But on the other hand, you need to take more than 5 minutes in the shower, because I guarantee you didn't get soap everywhere it's supposed to go in that time frame. So loading the dishwasher should only take about 10 minutes. You would not be able to convince a child with time blindness that it isn't a 3-hour task, and that it isn't the worst and most arduous task on the face of the planet. But if you stand there for 10 minutes with a timer and you go, okay, and you keep them on task and you say, okay, now how long did that take? Oh my goodness, it was 10 minutes, literally 10 minutes, not that bad, not that painful.
We found that there was a tremendous amount of merit in timing the tasks my kids felt were so arduous. Like, all right, let's set a timer and see how long it really does take you to put that basket of laundry away. And they were astonished to find out that it was less than 10 minutes, because it feels like forever when you hate doing something, doesn't it? So that might be a practical tool that parents can apply in their homeschools. What else did you find with that as far as time blindness is concerned? How do you deal with that? Do your older children also have that challenge?
No, my older ones really are a lot more, time aware. My husband struggles with the time blindness, so that can be a fun little challenge sometimes to, especially when we're like, hey, I've gotten all the kids ready and we're ready to walk out the door and he's just getting into the shower or, something like that. It's like, wait a second. You used up the time you had.
Okay,
So
we're not going into marriage counseling here though. But I think
so,
who are married to men who have ADHD understand.
I was going to say, yes, you're going to see it come down the pipe. I mean, typically when a child is diagnosed, a parent is as well, across the board, or a grandparent or an uncle or an aunt, or it's always tied to someone genetically in the family. You're going to see it, the cords run deep. My daughter, we just got a puppy, and so she's the one that is very ADHD, and so I've had to have her put a timer in her coat pocket because she will literally take the dog out for 30 seconds and think that that was enough time to let it go to the bathroom, and then can't figure out why she brings it in and it goes in the house. What is happening? And so for her, I'm like, Ellen, you are not allowed to come back in with the dog until you visually see it use the bathroom, and 2, until the timer says 10 minutes has gone by and you've walked around for that whole amount of time.
And so in that instance, that is where a timer really can be very effective. Kathleen, can you talk a little bit about, I know that you have gone through with your boys and transferred responsibility for their academic experiences to them. And I know that happens for every kid at a different age, but you had some practical experiences of how you set those parameters, particularly with your younger son, so that he could feel empowered, but you could also shift the burden for responsibility a little bit to him. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because I know we had that conversation. We have boys of similar age. Kathleen's youngest and my youngest are close in age. And so I'd love for you to elaborate a little bit on that.
Sure. Again, part of that comes with allowing him to pick his curriculum, his schoolwork, having him invested in it. And then I think it's a lot of just having the feedback, having the conversations with him. Especially, I mean, now he's 17, so he's doing school on his own, but I still have the conversation with him. How was it what you read today? How, did you understand it? And just, having that constant communication with him so that he knows that I'm invested in what he's doing, that I didn't just hand him a pile of books and say, here, go with this. He knows that I'm invested. But he's able to give me that feedback of what he's getting out of it. And that's also helping me to know, okay, what were my goals for this curriculum? What did I want him to get out of this curriculum? And then it helps me to know if he is getting that out of the curriculum. It's not just about him getting through the book and doing, this many worksheets and, writing this amount of paragraphs. I try to keep focus on what were my goals when I gave him this curriculum, and are those being met?
So again, circling back to that, as parents, if we're proactive in the process and really having clear understanding of what we want out of their experience, it makes it easier for them to follow through on that. I put in the chat a link to an article about time blindness, because there is so much more to understand there. And I think as parents, if we are the researchers, it gives our kids the advantage, because then we know how the world works for them. I have a question here that says, how did you figure out what math curriculum is the best fit, especially when a child is cognitively delayed, but thinks in black and white? So I'm going to let you ladies answer that. I'll start with Amanda.
I love a curriculum that kind of embraces all of the modalities, to where you're getting the visual, the auditory, the kinesthetic, because I feel like even with my kiddos that maybe struggle with retention and recall, and this is especially apparent in facts, learning the addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division facts, which are just so incredibly foundational. Doing a lot of modeling, doing a lot of reinforcement, with that kind of stuff. Those curriculums are really the ones that I find everybody uses, everybody benefits from. It doesn't matter what my child's strengths or weaknesses are, they are just doing incredibly well because it follows the end of mastery approach, where every concept builds on a previously learned concept, where it's really logical little steps and progressions forward. It just works. It just works with the way that their brains are wired. And so I have just across the board seen good success with that.
I have found that I am not a strong mathematician, and being able to come alongside my children and say, I'm going to learn this with you instead of learning it in a vacuum. Mathematics is a language that needs to be spoken with someone else. And sometimes as parents, when we're hesitant, mathematically, we tend to convey that hesitancy to our children as well. So we have to be very careful in how we speak in front of them as far as that is concerned. Sometimes we have a great observation here from Charlotte. She says, I have trouble telling when he's struggling with a lesson or when he doesn't want to do it. And I think all of us feel her pain. We've been there. We know that. A colleague of ours that I hugely respect, she holds a PhD in reading recovery. Her name is Dr. Karen Halinga, and she's actually the woman who developed our Spelling UC program. Dr. Halinga says, no child absolutely doesn't want to learn. And she said, kids aren't inherently lazy. There's something that we're missing as parents. And this is where we need to be the detectives to figure out what is not working. Do we have the wrong material? Do we have the right material at the wrong level? Conversely, and I want Kathleen to talk a little bit about this, what if we have the material that's below the student's capacity? I know that you had said you found it easier when you found material that your son could chase, as opposed to what you thought, you thought he needed to be. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Right. So I definitely, again, because my youngest son, because he didn't learn to read until he was 8. And then once I brought the curriculum in, I was probably starting at like first grade level, but I didn't worry about what the grade level was for him. And I learned to use washi tape over the books that say their grade level. And I appreciated the curriculums that don't say grade level. But I just had to move along at his pace. Again, it was just about reading his cues, making sure, and again, for my youngest child who was always asking why, it helped me sometimes to say, okay, I don't need to go through every single page of this curriculum and do every single part of it. The curriculum is a tool. It's for me to use in the way that makes sense to me. So I would learn to sometimes even jump ahead or skip ahead, jump around, because again, I tried to focus on what I wanted him to get out of that curriculum and just keep moving forward with it so that my goals were being met. So, you know, I guess I just always tried to meet him at the level that he was at. I didn't worry about grade level. And, you know, again, now that he's 17, he's a senior in high school, that's where he is. I remember there was one Math UC level, I think it was Zeta, pretty sure it was Zeta, that he got through in about 3 months because it just clicked. It just clicked and he just boom, boom, boom. And up until that point, we were probably behind in math. And then all of a sudden he just zoomed through Zeta. And then we were into the next level. And I thought, oh, this is why all those homeschoolers are always saying, meet your child where they're at. Don't worry about the grade level. You'll catch up eventually. And here I had a great example of it because all of a sudden he just propelled forward and he really had mastered it. And again, it was good that I just was reading him and making sure that, you know, once I saw that he was learning it and he could move on, we went with his pace.
I think one of the things that is really important is to recognize we all have preferences for curricula. I'll teach you to diagram sentences till the cows come home, but math is not my favorite. But we all have goals and objectives that we need to accomplish, and sometimes that includes things we don't like. I would rather not fold laundry In fact, I'd rather not even do laundry, but I'm too cold natured to live in a nudist colony. And so somebody has to get it done. And we have to set those kinds of examples for our kids as well. Next week, we're actually going to talk in depth about what do you do when you dread teaching mathematics. And I would encourage you to, if that is a struggle in your household, to sign up for that conversation, because I think that you will find it a beneficial one. Today, you guys have asked some great questions. And I think one of the things that we need to recognize is, as parents, we hold the reins to success for our children. And that requires us to be the keenest observers of them and to be able to know how to march forward with that. I think one of the things that is really important, and we've had a dialogue going on in the chat that has been really interesting. So those of you who are in the live presentation are not going to get the benefit of this dialogue. But one of the things that we've been talking about here is the pressure that we feel externally from those who are experts in the field and think that they can advise us on how to instruct our children. There is no one that is a better expert for your child than you. And so we want to leave you with a word of encouragement that you all have the best possible tool to help your child learn. And that tool is you. I'm going to leave the closing comments to the ladies. Since I started with Amanda, Kathleen, will you please give the ladies your closing comments? And then Amanda, I will let your word be the last one today.
Okay, so I would just say, since the topic here is to help the distracted child, in that, just continue to be flexible. Continue to be flexible and keep tweaking until you figure out what helps that child to learn the way that they need to learn. Don't pigeonhole yourself or that child into a certain curriculum, a certain learning style, a certain way that they must do school. Just keep being really flexible and you will figure it out. You will all of a sudden find a groove and realize, okay, great, this is working. Let's keep doing this.
Great. Amanda?
And I would say one of my favorite authors on the planet is Dorinda Wilson, and she is the author of The Unhurried Homeschooler. And so if you do have children who have learning differences or different learning styles or attention deficit or some of those things that really make learning a challenge, her writings are so encouraging. Her blog is so encouraging. She has tons of tips about basically not stressing. Don't stress. You've got more time than you think. You have less time than you think. And it's all wrapped into one. And again, there is no one better equipped to be in your kid's corner and to successfully educate your child than you are. And so don't let them see you struggle or lack confidence. And definitely, if you're struggling or you're feeling frustrated, reach out. There are so many other moms out there that are available to be sounding boards and to offer you advice, just like this roundtable has been. And that network and that community is invaluable. And so definitely make use of that, and don't stay isolated, and don't focus on your failings, focus on the positives.
I think those are wise words to leave you with today. Thank you all so much for joining us, for trusting us with this last hour of your time. We look forward to having you all join us again in the future. Thank you all so much. Take care. Have a blessed day.